I'd like to network as much as I can, because I do think that the more sense of community you have within the coaching, you know, coaches across Manila and further, is the best way that you can really develop your grassroots level, and hopefully leading up to being able to compete more at a highest level, because we're not far from it at all. We had a decent chance at it a few years ago.
Welcome to Across the Line. It's Football Friday, and we've got a great show for you on this quarantine session. Football is coming back to some areas of the world, and a little bit about that. And we've got Patricia Tomanon on the show as well. She is a national team player for the women's team of the Philippines. She's also a Kaya player and a Kaya Academy coach alongside Chris Greatwich. You know a little bit about her. Chris, what do you think of the conversation today?
Very interesting conversation with Coach Pat, someone who has come to prominence recently with some of her exploits with the women's national team. She's had a really, really good campaign with the Kaya women's team in the Sevens League. And she talks a lot about her involvement with coaching, some really interesting elements to her backstory, which you won't spoil. You have to listen to it, but there's a few surprises in there that we didn't know about her. But overall, she has a really interesting outlook on how the development of Philippine football, especially on the women's side, has taken shape in recent years, and how she plans to cultivate it in the upcoming years. So, no, really, really insightful interview from Pat, and it was great to hear her perspective on everything.
Yeah, definitely. That section about her upbringing, that's gold. It's really something that was a bit of a surprise for me as well. If you enjoy this episode, and I hope you do, please do subscribe to the show over on YouTube, Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts. Rate and review the show to help us get the word out to more of the individuals who might enjoy this content. All right, and find us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. Just look for Across the Line. Without further ado, we've got Patricia Tomanon here on the show. Welcome to Across the Line. It's another Football Friday, and as you can see, the quarantine sessions continue on the show. We've got a little bit of good news. We got some bad news as well. All right, so I'm going to start off with the bad news just to get that out of the way. It is day 58 on quarantine, which means we are 2 months in, and the road ahead is looking a little uncertain. All right, we're not entirely sure how things are going to progress from here. There are rumors that maybe there will be another month of this same scenario ongoing. Fingers crossed that is not the case, and that there is some sort of plan that is going to be laid out in the near future, and that we will be familiar with what to do in the days to come. The good news, there are countries that are starting to open themselves up back to the world of football. La Liga is opening up. The Bundesliga is opening up. The K-League has started already in Korea. So there is light at the end of the tunnel for the world of football. Added good news, today on the show, we've got Patricia Tomanon on the show. She is national team player, KFC player, and academy coach. Well-versed in the world of football abroad and here in the Philippines as well. So we're going to get a chance to speak with her. And of course, we've got Chris Greatwich on the show. How's it going, Chris?
I'm very good, sir. How's everyone else? How are you doing, Pat? You good?
I'm great. How are you? How are both of you?
All right.
Doing okay. We're doing okay, aren't we? I know Jing's using the time effectively to work on his yoga skills. That's what we were talking about earlier. Apparently he's extra flexible these days. So, what have you been up to, Pat, though? How are you? How are you passing the time currently in lockdown?
Lots of home workouts, a bit of YouTube research, trying to learn more stuff about coaching, trying to hone in on that role at the moment, and some stuff for the academy as well. Other than that, that's it. Pretty mundane, I would say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've had you very busy with the academy. You've been doing lots of stuff with our girls program of late. I see you posting a lot of videos of you demonstrating your extra quick feet, though. I think you've been very, very busy demonstrating some of your skills. So how have they been received by the kids? Have they been wowed? Have they been amazed by how good you are? What's been the general response?
I wouldn't necessarily say amazed, but they're more accepting of the challenge. I think
Okay.
they want to try to attain these like small little skills, so they're really receptive to it, and they get really excited when they send me their feedback, or like I've tried this certain skill, and they get really excited about it. So that's really nice to see. So that's actually been a few of the highlights throughout quarantine, is seeing how excited the kids are with their new acquired ball mastery skills that I can help them with.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's cool.
That's awesome.
I don't do any of the ball mastery work, but I enjoy watching it. One of the highlights of my feed while I'm scrolling up, and like, all right, Pat's going to show us some skills today, so let's check it out. And there's always good music attached to it, so it's always a treat to watch. But where did you develop these ball skills, right? Where did you hone your skills growing up?
I grew up in South Florida, and at the time of that, like me beginning with football, it was very South American style. So there's a lot of like playing with the ball, getting your touches on the ball. So I spent a lot of time learning that. I remember my parents buying a Corver DVD, which later on, like I feel like I've come full circle. So I used to watch these DVDs, and then I'd try to skill in my room or go downstairs and try to do it in a bigger space. And eventually that's just kind of how I've acquired it. But more over the past year, I've been able to really hone on it and play with patterns and things like that. Whereas before I would just try to mimic other people. So it gives me a bit of creativity when it comes to the pattern making, which is fun.
Do you want to expand a little bit, Pat, on what Curver coaching is? Because I'm sure some of the listeners will be familiar with it, but many people will not be. So do you want to just explain a little bit about the methodology behind Curver and how you've developed and adapted it from being a player who's experienced it to obviously implementing it now as a coach?
So Corver is essentially trying to give players their confidence by having as many touches on the ball as possible. So just getting as much touch as possible, then eventually trying to add the speed element to it. So you do your skills with speed, then you add the opponent element to it. So now you're going into 1v1s, 2v2s, and things like that. So it's really just building individual players with skills, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's only attacking players. It really focuses on everyone from goalkeepers all the way up to your strikers. So being an individual, having confidence on the ball so that it gives you more options as you're playing. Now you have all the skills or the tools that you need in different scenarios. So just create in training, right? Creating those scenarios in like the 1v1s, 2v2s, 3v3s, and up to small-sided games. Really helps them apply these skills that they acquire through the program.
And how did you think it developed you as a player? How did it help you as a youngster develop your technical game?
Well, unfortunately for me, I only got maybe the first two portions of that. So I was only able to factory and maybe doing it with speed, but in terms of training, I wasn't in the Corver program. My club didn't apply that. So I wasn't able to use that. And I feel that it may have helped me even more so. I think I gained my individualism, like my confidence within the past, honestly, later in my career, just by saying, hey, I'm just going to try these skills out and see if it works out for me on 1v1 situations. And it was a lot of trial and error. But being able to see it with a younger group of kids trying these and seeing it over a course of a 3 or 4 month period, and how much confidence they get on the ball is really amazing to me. So sometimes I wish I feel like I had that growing up, but it's great to be able to give that to kids as well.
It's quite funny you say that because obviously you coach in our academy now, and we had Ina Palacios on the show a few weeks ago, and she was saying something about goalkeeping, wasn't she, Jing? She was saying how a lot of her sort of methodologies within goalkeeping now are based upon experiences that she didn't get when she was growing up through the system here in the Philippines. So it's quite interesting to see how you similarly have looked upon some of the deficiencies in the programs that you played in, or areas of coaching that you didn't get as a kid, and are now adapting this in your own coaching coaching career now. I think that's quite an interesting comparison when you look at both you and Ina working in the same space now.
Yeah, we actually talk about that frequently, and how going into it's a different role, right? Being from a player, it's completely different going into coaching. So you start seeing, wow, had I had this when I was younger, I probably would be a bit of a different player. So now trying to find a way to find those deficiencies in your previous, like in your youth career, and being able to implement it to like a new generation, I think is really, really nice.
Yeah.
And I love talking to Ina about that, actually. Yeah.
How old are you now, Patricia, if you don't mind me asking?
I am 26.
26. So you are in the national team right now, right? There was an interesting little story that I actually wanted to get into with regards to the most recent SEA Games and sort of the unfortunate events that led up to that for you and your playing career. But you're 26, which means you're sort of like in the prime of your, physical capabilities as an athlete, right? You're still much pushing to become a standout player, but you're also very busy with the coaching at this point in time. Do you think as if that sort of propels one and the other? You know, as a player, you're growing more quickly because you're also teaching the game. Does that at all translate?
Yes, 1,000%. 1,000%. Because well, I've been watching YouTube like youth games and trying to learn like the skill of like finding the mistakes and what led to those mistakes, so that eventually when we do get back on the field, I'm able to see that in matches. And I'm now watching games more critically. So watching back my old film, I'm a bit more nitpicky, and that's applied into playing before. So I've been doing that for a few months and trying to apply what I see, even from a youth level, because you still see it at a professional level. And so, yeah, it's definitely made me more of a critical thinker as a player.
It's kind of an interesting thing, Chris. Like you went into your coaching also as well, sort of while you were playing. What effect did that have on your playing as you were still in your playing career with Kaya?
No, I think the same as really what Pat's saying. I think a lot of players would benefit from doing some kind of coaching course, or being involved in working with young players, because I think it does give you more of an analytical perspective on the game, and definitely you start to watch games not just as a fan or as a spectator, but you're looking for certain things, certain aspects of the game that could potentially improve you. And with that, I think it definitely broadens your perspective on the game. I certainly found myself watching games with a completely different lens compared to how I did when I was in my teens or early 20s. And I think it had a massive effect on me. I think it also gives players the chance to be more respectful of their coaches, because they know and appreciate the amount of time and effort it takes to put on a session. And one of the things I think they appreciate more is the fact standing in front of a group and having to deliver a session in a very clear and concise manner is actually very difficult. And while you're playing as a regular player, you don't understand the nuances and the intricacies of what that entails. To put on a session that has a good flow, to make your points in a clear and concise way, I think it's a skill and it's an art that needs to be honed and perfected. And I think if sometimes players can get to see that side of the game, it will give you more of an insight into what it takes to be a coach, but also, you know, have a more analytical look on the game, analytical perspective, which I think is something that as a player, sometimes I think, if I'm being a bit critical, especially in the modern game, I think as to delve deeper into the game so much these days. So I think having that perspective as a coach player, you know, still doing both is it's only benefited me, and it seems as though it benefited Pat as well. What I'd like to know with Pat is how difficult has it been to balance the two? You know, do you find yourself in a situation where you feel like a frustrated player? Do you get frustrated with kids when they can't quite do the things that you could do as a player? Like, how have you found it trying to balance the two roles, and have you found anything frustrating in doing so?
Funny enough, before I even got into coaching, I always was like, I can't see myself coaching because really I'm quite an impatient person. Like, I get really impatient. But working with kids, I've just been so patient, and it's just helped me more on my communication skills. So if it's something that they're not quite grasping, I'm always trying to find ways like, okay, how is this player going to understand it? How can I convey it in a way that they're going to be able to receive the information and then get them to perform tasks that I'm trying to get them to do? So I haven't gotten that frustrated yet, but that's also because I haven't had any league games. So we'll see. But for training wise, I haven't had any frustrations thus far. So that's a good sign.
Obviously, you were looking forward to getting back on the pitch, and you have been back on the pitch for a few matches for Kaya. It's been a long road back for you from injury. And for those who are unfamiliar, before you started getting into coaching with Kaya, you were actually deep into preparation just these days, which were just recently passed here in the country. Unfortunately, in the lead up to that, you suffered your first major injury in your career, and that took you out of the running for that. And then that's sort of what led you into the path of getting into Kaya, getting into your recovery and getting back onto the pitch. What was that experience like for you? Obviously, you've moved to the Philippines from the United States, and you were getting yourself pumped up for this big tournament, and then obviously got derailed, and that must have been quite an experience for you. What was that like, having to go through that entire thing?
Yeah, quite frustrating, especially coming off of the Olympic qualifier that we had earlier last year. After that tournament, I'd gone home and really prepped myself, like probably the best preparation I'd ever done. And I was ready to come here for AFF. And yeah, so that's when the injury happened early into that training camp. And it was really like mental toughness. Like I never experienced anything like that. The longest I'd ever been out was like 3 weeks for an ankle sprain, like never anything serious. So it was hard trying to stay positive. Definitely watching the girls play for AFF. And at that point, I was still had some positive outlook in terms of being able to get back on the field quick enough for SEA Games. There was hope at the end of there was light at the end of the tunnel at that point. And my recovery was going fairly well. But even so, watching the girls play online was just like, man, it was torture. It was really torture. I mean, I was really happy for them. They had a great outcome in that tournament. And then when they came back, I was able to start running and participating in training, and I was a part of that closed camp as well. But I wasn't in the right shape for SEA Games. SEA Games is such a massive tournament, and you really need to be 100% for that. So my coaching staff didn't feel like I was ready for that, and I didn't, because at risk off just coming out of an injury. Yeah, it was just a lot of mental toughness that I had to build over time, and trying to stay positive and surrounding myself with really great people that were even not being able to achieve my goal, which was to be ready for SEA Games. It was still a good experience in a sense that, yeah, I found Kaya, the team, as well as the academy, which I was gonna coach her academy even before I got injured. Chris would know. Eunice, our PT, actually mentioned me prior, but I didn't want to coach in a boot, so I didn't end up doing that and waited till I was fully recovered. But yeah, it was very frustrating. I went to one of their matches in Binyan, and man, right in the chest. But it was okay, and I'm really proud of my teammates, and they were really supportive. Sorry, got a phone call. Yeah, just very frustrating.
How long were you out?
I was out for 2 months or 2.5 months, I believe. I was in a boot for over a month.
And how did you sustain
That's the
it,
longest.
Pat?
Good.
How did you sustain that injury, Pat?
So we had a friendly match set up in our training camp, and I was waiting to receive a ball. The person came from behind and chopped my ankle, and I fell forward, and ankle just snapped. So it's quite crazy actually hearing the bone crack. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It was insane. Yeah.
And this was what, a training game amongst yourselves, or was it in a friendly game against a college team, or who was the opponent?
It was a friendly against a club team against boys. They're U15, I believe. I think it was Malaya, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. It was great. I was playing a great first half, second half, boom, done. But it was definitely a learning lesson for me.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people really don't highlight, I feel as though it's mentally, it's very, very demanding on players when they have injuries. You know, even yesterday I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about how they try to integrate injured players as much as possible. So even in the recovery, can you bring the exercise bike onto the training field so that they can at least, you know, feel part of the squad some way, somehow, you know, because it's very, very difficult for that injured player to feel a part of the action when they're not able to compete on the field. And judging by, you know, your reaction, I'm assuming that it must have been very difficult for you to feel part of the team when obviously you weren't part of the squad for the SEA Games, and then obviously going to watch and you want to support the group, but there's also, it's tinged with sadness because you invariably want to be involved with that competition. Like, how did you cope with that? I mean, or did you cope with that? I mean, you said that you surrounded yourselves with people who are positive, but was it, you know, I'd imagine it'd be very, very difficult for you to watch those games, and it must have been very conflicting for you.
Yeah, mentally, yeah, very conflicting, because it's like you don't want to have this negative feeling, but like you said, I mean, it did feel a bit like I was left out. And it wasn't, obviously, there were no intentions of making me feel that way, but it is what it is, right? You can't participate in some of the exercises. And as much as possible, they try to integrate me with warm-ups, or try to get me to participate in certain exercises that I was capable of doing. But, once it started to get beyond that, yeah. So sitting in training and doing your exercises to the side while everyone else is, playing, it was really quite frustrating, but it really, you have to put it in perspective, like, it's not about you at the moment. It's really about them. It's much bigger than yourself. And that's how I tried to perceive it as much as I could, because it's so easy to be like, oh, me. I'm injured. I want to be a part of this, but they're preparing for something much bigger that means much more. So,
right.
Yeah. 1 second. Never mind. I thought I was getting a phone call, but
So
sorry.
there's scheduled to be a big tournament this year, right? There's supposed to be a AFF championship that was supposed to be held in the Philippines. Now, obviously, we don't know what is the situation with that at the moment, but is that something that you're looking at? Is that something that's driving you on to make sure that, hey, we might be on quarantine, but I got to keep myself in shape?
1000%. I'm trying to stay in shape for that, whenever that may be, and for Kaya, the Sevens League, whenever we do return back on the pitch. But yeah, just trying to stay in shape and eating healthy, because it's so easy to fall into the snacking habits that you have during quarantine. But yeah, it's a way for me to keep motivated. Sometimes I go too hard and I have to pace myself, because you don't want to peak too early in your training. But you get so used to having such a high intensity regimen all the time that it gets quite boring when you do your normal moderate exercise. Yeah.
What's the competition again? Sorry, Pat. What's the competition that's potentially going to be on here in the Philippines?
We're hosting AFF. Supposed to be
the AFF Championships. Yeah.
Yes, the first round, but I believe
okay.
We have gone through the first round already based on previous tournament performances, and we would be going into the second round.
Okay.
But yeah.
Would have been a great game, tournament rather, to sort of showcase the women's game once again, which has been growing quite a bit over the last couple years in particular, driven a lot by the performances of the team in the Asian competition, the Asian Cup, and obviously in the Olympic qualifiers. There's a lot of excitement that's being placed upon the women's game. A lot of people are thinking as well that if we are going to make it into a World Cup or to a major competition and really perform well, it's going to be the women that are going to do this rather than the men's team. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that is the case, and how do you feel about the profile of the women's game here in the country at the moment?
Backing off of SEA Games, I think it's definitely growing, and we're starting to get a much more attention than we've had in the past. And I think even just based off of last year's performance throughout the year, not just with SEA Games, like all three tournaments that were played, I think it was slowly but continuously growing, and the fan base is growing. And I think that's why we got such a great turnout for some of the matches that were played in Binyan because of that. So there's definitely an improvement with the team because of the consistency that they've had, we had over the past year, which hopefully will continue in preparation for the following AFF that we should be hosting.
I mean, there's obviously got to be a bit of excitement or positivity in the outlook of how the team will be. I mean, you've you've moved your entire life over here to the Philippines. Tell us about that decision. I mean, what were you doing in the States prior to your decision to come over?
Well, I was doing a lot of just training on my own or training with some boys teams as well as coaching. So I was doing a bit of coaching and private training. And I was just gone back and forth so often that I figured, you know what, if I'm going to spend, at the time, it was going to be 3 tournaments in a row. So I figured, just go and see where football takes you in the Philippines. And that's really the reason why. And I haven't really regretted it. It's such a growing experience, and it's definitely different from the lifestyle that I was used to, but in a good way. I think it's always good to try different things. It's so easy to stay in your little bubble and get used to your usual routine. So that's been really nice. And being able to play with my teammates more often outside of just a national team, whether it's with sevens in the Sevens League or like little pickup games and stuff like that. So it's been nice.
It's a big decision, Chris, when you moved here, it was in 2013, is that correct?
Yeah.
But you had the academy to look forward to as well, right? You were going to take charge of the academy and play for Kaya and be in and around the national team?
Yeah, so the timing of it for me was perfect. I mean, we had just probably had 2 or 3 years of the UFL, but it really started to pick up. I'd sort of been involved with the national team, but was a little bit in and out under Weiss at this point. I was in the squad for the Suzuki Cup 2012, but didn't play. So I didn't even get onto the pitch. So, I thought if I wanted to further that, I'd have to make the move. And then the opportunity came to come here. And, one of the reasons why I came in, because I thought the opportunity was really good to start something afresh. I mean, the academy here was relatively small. We only had, probably 30, 40 kids at the time when I first came. And, I thought it'd be nice to do something that I could generally build and scale out. And I felt as though the opportunity was too good to be passed up on. So, yeah, we made that decision. And one of the things I wanted to ask Pat was, what was it about the opportunity that you saw? Because obviously you'd been back and forth a little bit beforehand. But what was it about the opportunity that you saw about coming to the Philippines that really excited you? Was it the fact that you just wanted to get with the national team and see how that would transpire? Or did you think that there would be other avenues for you to develop other aspects of your football interests, obviously such as coaching, which you'd mentioned you'd been involved with before?
So initially it was for the national team. So yeah, I figured we would have quite a few competitions, so it'd be easier. And after that, I kind of realized that it was more than that. I've always had to find. I never understood how I could give back to the game until I got involved in coaching. So coaching was definitely something that was a big factor into me moving as well, because it's hard to. It's easy in the States to, they have so much access to football there, and it's not the same. And I wanted to be able to give back to the younger generation here somehow, aside from just playing. So that I found out would be coaching. And just wanting to be able to give back to the game here, because growing up here, when I was here until I was 10, I wasn't playing football until I moved to America. So I want to be able to spread the game to as many kids as possible, because it's a beautiful game that they should be involved in, and that it doesn't have a height requirement or whatever the case may be with the popular sports here, that everyone should be able to play. So I think that was actually one of the bigger factors, is being able to I wanted to influence the game here.
Wait a second. You were born here, Pat? In the Philippines?
Yes, I was born. Yeah, I was born here. Born in Makati, raised here till I was 10, and then moved to the U.S.
Until you were 10. All right. So you started playing
Yeah.
football after, at like what age?
So right after I moved there, I tried tennis first. It was not my sport. And then that lasted for maybe a month. And then we saw a soccer field there, a football field there. And there was a camp being held. Funny enough, it was called British Soccer Camp. So I was like, oh, let me try that out. And ever since then, I just couldn't stop playing.
So that's why you speak Filipino. You speak Tagalog pretty decent.
Yeah.
It's like 10 years of your life here before moving out.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when did you go
come
to
back
school,
here,
Pat? Sorry, Jing. Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Where did you go to school?
I went to a public school. So I went to Makati Elementary School, just in the Poblacion area. They didn't really have sports, so there were no extracurricular activities except for like clubs. And I think I played like ping pong after school with my friends. So that was the most of a sport I played.
What do you remember about those formative years? Yeah, definitely. What do you remember of those sort of formative years? Do you remember much?
I remember only being able to speak English for the first 3 years, and I remember asking my mom. I came home one day from school and I was like, "Mom, please, like, I need to learn how to speak Tagalog because, like, outside of the classroom, I don't have any friends. No one wants to talk to me because I only speak English. So what am I supposed to do?" So that, and I spent a lot of time playing in the streets. So I played like badminton and tag and ping pong, whatever you're really allowed to play outside in the streets here that's safe. But those are the things that I really remember most when I was living here.
And how long did it take for you to grasp the language?
I think fairly quickly because at the time it was my mom would speak to me in Tagalog at home. I would play with my friends outside who speak Tagalog, and my uncle was living with us at the time too. So I was getting a lot of the language from other people.
Wow. And you lived in Makati also then, I'm presuming?
Yes.
In what area did you grow up in? Where
it
in
was
Makati?
just near Makati Elementary School in Poblacion somewhere.
It's so interesting.
It was a little townhouse in Poblacion, I remember.
I can imagine exactly what it looks like, because that's sort of the setup that I used to go back to. I grew up in Indonesia, but whenever I go back to the Philippines, my family lived in that spot in Poblacion. So tight streets, very urban area, sari-sari stores and stuff like this, right? That's a very Manila city type environment to get familiar with. That's interesting. What did your dad do here, or what was his work here in the Philippines?
1 second. So sorry. Just received a package. So my dad he was working in like the shoe industry actually. So he worked with like companies like Nike and I believe, what was another one? Aldo. So what he would do is he would go to manufacturing facilities that would have whatever prerequisite the company would ask for the shoe design that they needed. So he was traveling quite often. So he would be here or Cambodia, Indonesia, or wherever these main factories are in Asia.
Did you ever revisit your roots? Where's your mom from? Romblon, is that correct?
Yeah, mom is from Romblon. I was recently there right before Christmas time, and oh, I love it there. It's so beautiful. Lots of beaches, lots of hiking, very countryside, relaxed vibes. I really enjoy being there.
Chris, where are you from? Where's your mom from?
Oh, don't ask this question. Yeah, it's so long-winded. I'll give you the yeah. So my mum's born in Davao, but she was raised here in Manila. But most of
Wow.
the family lives in Bohol. So yeah, so basically, yeah, nomadic. Everyone claims to be from everywhere in the family. So you know, whenever I get that question, I can just claim anywhere pretty much. But no, it's interesting that you say that because you know, like both of you have alluded to, like I can picture that. I mean, the first time I came here with my mum, I was a bit older, and she would talk about you know where she used to live, and then eventually she took me down there, and yeah, I can sort of imagine that. You said the picture of you as a young, you know, how would you describe it? Yeah, it's a young girl, I guess, on the street playing funny street games, this kind of thing. Like it's the image that I have in my mind, like with how my mother grew up here in the Philippines. So yeah, I guess it sort of conjures up and evokes these certain imagery that I think I have when I think about like my relatives and how they grew up here in Manila. Like what do you recall the transition when you went back to the US? So if you were 10 or 11 years old when you went to the US, do you recall that transition and how difficult was it in terms of the integration from here to when you moved to the US?
I surprisingly didn't have a difficult time. Definitely being able to speak English helped fluently. And because the area that I live in, South Florida, is so culturally diverse that I didn't look any different from people, although there weren't many Asians, but being like racially ambiguous wasn't anything new to them. So
A strong
like
sort
I
of
didn't have a
Spanish
problem.
community there, right?
Yeah, Spanish, Caribbean.
Yeah.
So it was nice. It was nice that I didn't have a problem being able to make friends. I think I made friends fairly quickly, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Okay. Well, obviously, you then fell in love with the game of football. I'm quite intrigued how you progressed through the system because I know you went on to play at the Division One college soccer level, which is an absolutely incredible level of football to be playing at. And for those who don't realise, it's arguably although it's not a professional level, it's one of the top leagues in the world when you actually you compare it apples to apples. How did you go from being this 10-year-old who'd never really played football before to managing to get a college scholarship 8 years down the line? Like, what did that development and what did that transition look like? And how did you get from that point to being able to play at the Division One level?
So I moved fairly quickly. So I started with recreational. So that's
Yeah.
like not competitive, your Sunday games, things like that. But it was with a boys team. So
Okay.
it was co-ed, but I was the only girl. And I was training quite a lot because I would just wanted to get better. I wanted to catch up with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a pretty competitive person. So that probably helped me a lot growing up. And within 6 months of playing recreational league, I was approached, I think, or my parents were approached by a club coach. So a travel club coach came up to them and said, like, if she'd like to train with the club team, she can. So I transferred over with them. They were training, I think, 3 to 4 times a week, but then in between those days, I would actually go to the field, and the boys coach for, I think, the U15 asked if I wanted to join their training, which I was not at any level close to being good enough to train with them, but I would appreciate the offer, and I didn't really want to do it. It's like I would train with them. So training often helps me catch up a bit because I started fairly late in comparison to most players, and yeah, playing lots of travel soccer is the way that I got recruited for college. So going into showcase tournaments, and over the summer I would go to ID camps. So ID camps were a really big factor. That's actually one of the main reasons why I got back. I was not even interested in the school that I ended up going to. I was interested somewhere else, and that's the reason why I went to the camp, because their head coach is there. But the assistant coach for my school was really impressed by me, and we continued contact, and eventually I ended up being an FIU Panther.
Yeah, so what options did you have on the table then, or what schools were you considering to go to before you made your decision to go to FIU?
So I had a few D2 options: Nova University, which was right down the street from my house, which is why it was such an option. I believe I wanted to go to Rollins as well, which is a private Division II school. I was in talks with USF for quite a long time, and Florida Gulf Coast. I really wanted to stay in Florida because I liked being around my family.
Yeah.
So,
and the level of play is very high still as well. The level of play is very good in Florida for the girls, for sure.
Really competitive. And I think Louisiana, some school in Louisiana, but I don't think I'd fit in Louisiana very well. So I stayed in South Florida.
And what was it that made you choose to go to FIU? What was it about the school that attracted you? Because a lot of those schools are top schools, and if you're going to go to school in Florida, you're going to get good weather. The fields are going to be nice. It's the facilities are going to be great. But all of those schools. So what was it about FIU that said, no, this is the school that I want to go to?
Well, for one, there were a lot of girls that I already knew. So there were 3 girls from my club that were a year older than me that went there.
Okay.
So I asked them what they think it's like, and they told me good things. In high school, went on a visit for a weekend, and I stayed at the athletic department had such a family vibe to it, which I really like, so it wouldn't be hard for me to really adjust and get to know people. The location's amazing as well, so it was only 45 minutes from my house, and it's also only 45 minutes to the beach, or 30 minutes to the beach, so not a bad deal.
Where is it? Is it Boca Raton? Where is FIU?
It's in South Miami, or not South Miami, but it's 45 minutes outside of downtown Miami.
Yeah. Okay. That's quite interesting. I mean, Jing, we've got a lot of people who listen to the show who I think are sort of in the high school phase, are looking at what they're going to do for the next step, and they listen to a lot of these podcasts because they're trying to figure out how to navigate their own footballing pathway. And I think what's quite interesting is with some of the kids that are in my academy, or some of the other kids that we've spoken to, people like William Valtos, for example, who went to Wake Forest, who we had on the show, had a similar sort of path, albeit from the Philippines, because he did a lot of ID camps as well.
Yeah.
And he made that decision that if I'm here, no one's really going to be seeing me. I need to go and really force the issue. I need to go to these ID camps and showcase my ability in those types of settings. Because a lot of these coaches are getting, tons of emails, tons of videos from kids all across the world. And I imagine the Florida schools are inundated with these types of emails. Some of the schools that you mentioned there, Pat, I spoke to some of those schools myself. And what was the criteria for me wanting to go to those schools? Well, I would love to live in Miami. I'd love to live in LA. And I messaged every single school in Florida and California solely for that reason, because I wanted to enjoy all the trappings that come with living in those types of areas. And I think one of the things that I think is interesting with your story and Williams as well is the fact that you have to be diligent and very calculated with how you spend your time if you're going to these types of showcases. So, do your research, be diligent, take a look at which coaches are going to go there, or I want to go to this school because I think this coach is going to be running sessions there, or it's a school that would do a major that I'm interested in pursuing, etc., etc. I think that's really, really important. And, so for anyone that's listening in those episodes, I think it's important that if you do aspire to go, it might be a college in the US, it might be somewhere in the UK, it might even be a college here, but make sure you do your due diligence, because if you don't want to waste the best years of your footballing career, you need to make sure you do your research and play for a coach and play for a team that you're going to enjoy playing for those 4 years. Because if you don't do that and you go into that process blind and make a bad decision, you're really going to pay the price for it. So, it was quite interesting to see how you went about that recruitment process, and how ultimately you went to a school, hopefully, that you enjoyed. I mean, how was your 4-year career at FIU? Did you enjoy it? How did you find playing at that level?
I enjoyed the school in itself, but I did not have the best time career playing wise. I didn't really didn't fit the style of play that my coach wanted, and I was too afraid to jump ship. I was always thinking like, they always say the grass isn't always greener on the other side, so why even bother try leaving? So I kind of just stuck it out. But it wasn't the ideal situation. So if there was something that I could advise current collegiate athletes or football players that are in college or looking to be in that, and if they find themselves where they don't really feel like they fit the mold that your coach is, or whatever his criteria of playing is, his or her criteria, have a serious discussion with your coach and see if you can look at your other options, because there's plenty of options that you can go to, and don't feel like you're stuck in one place. But yeah, in terms of my career, it wasn't great in FIU, but I still don't regret it. I really love my school and I love the girls that I played with as well.
What was the style of play? What was it about the coach's approach that didn't quite fit in with your style?
Well, he was really quite, as much as he said he liked to play more of a possession game, it was a lot of direct play. And I played at a club where we played out of the back, and I played as a center back first when I was recruited, and became a outside back at college. So I just didn't fit the style of play, and no matter how great my performance was in training, I never really I didn't make the cut to get on the starting 11. And I would come in as a two. And so he took a confidence as a player. So, and it was nothing against me, obviously. It was just I just didn't fit what he wanted.
And at what point did you get on the radar of the women's team of the Philippines? And how did that come about?
Apparently, they reached out to my mother first, and I was a freshman in college, but it was in her spam messages. Didn't see it. And then they reached out to me at the end of I was like, man, are you kidding me? So they reached out to me personally when I was at the end of my junior season of college. And I spoke to my parents about it. I was kind of iffy on the situation because, to be honest, they reached out to me on Twitter. And I was like, how reliable is this really? Like, are we really going to fall for this? Spoke to my parents about it. They're like, yeah, 1000% go. Had my first tryout with the national team in California over Thanksgiving break. And a few months later, I was asked to go to the Philippines for a second round of tryouts in Manila. And that's where it all began.
What year was that?
2015.
And what do you recall of your first experience here in the Philippines?
That was very disorganized, I will say. It was a very disorganized campaign. There was a lot of he said, she said thing going on, and I just like, all right, I guess this is how things work here. But it was a struggle. 2 months of that was quite difficult. A lot of my teammates and I that came from here were like, what is going on? 90% of the time, just happy that we would show up to the field, but anything outside of that, we were just overwhelmed. Things have gotten better since, but it was a wild ride, to say the least.
2015. So 4 years now with the team, and you're saying it's changed quite a bit. How long has it been that the team has stuck together now? It's been like 2 years, a year and a half, that this current batch, and there's been a bit of continuity.
Actually, since the first tournament I played, which was 2016, a good chunk of the overseas players from that time, not all of us stuck. So some of us from that batch stuck. And then here and there over the years, we would pick up a few more players that were, ride or die, and they're willing to take on the challenge. And yeah, so it's been continuously getting better since then.
It's quite interesting. I mean, you guys are sort of this first batch of individuals now. I guess the women's team is sort of undergoing a similar phase that the men's team had a few years back, where a lot of the guys migrated over to the Philippines and are now trying to find ways to stick it out here closer to the national team, whilst also figuring out everything around it, finding out a career path and getting involved and staying involved in the game while looking to accomplish the ambitions that they've set out for in the national team. Obviously, there's a few hurdles along the way for the women's game, in that the league is not as established as the UFL once was. I believe the games are being played in Carmona early in the morning, and but there is some sort of structure that it's being set up now. Are you hopeful about what's to come? How do you envision things moving forward? And do you envision more people like yourself coming over to the Philippines and getting involved
I am hopeful, and I think there's people in the backgrounds that really want to grow the game, and that's really nice to see. To see in that sense that it's not just the players now advocating for the game to be taken. In terms of the league, yeah, I think that might take a few more years, but yeah, I think some of the people that are on the team now are more than willing to help grow the game in however they can, whether that be continuing and playing or joining the coaching side, and see how we can develop it in that sense.
When you were starting out, Chris, when you guys moved over here, and then that initial batch of Filipino foreigners came by. I know you hate that, but a lot of the guys were starting to migrate over to the Philippines. Do you guys collectively speak with one another about how you guys wish things would transpire, or how you guys think about growing the profile of the game?
You know what, mate? It's really interesting. It's really interesting that you say that, because I think in Ina and Pat in particular, who are obviously guys that are involved with the academy, I see a lot of similar traits with that wave of players that we had that came over in and around the same sort of time. You know, if you look at the likes of myself, my brother Phil, James, I put Chiefy in that, although he didn't leave, but he's in our batch. You know, we all set up football schools. We all worked in coaching, and then we're the ones who have our own coaching schools. And then there's ones who carried on and worked. You know, people like Nate Burke, he came in and worked. You know, so there was loads of these people that had made the decision to come over here, and obviously, one, it facilitates the need to earn money. We understand that it needs to be done so you can earn an income, but also it's a developmental tool to exactly what Pat and exactly what Ina said earlier, to an opportunity to give back and to develop the aspects that we perhaps didn't get when we were kids, and use some of the knowledge that we've acquired to put that back into the system here. And hopefully to grow the game from the bottom up, because we know that there's very little going on from other avenues. You know, we need to take responsibility for ourselves to develop the young footballers of today, certainly in the metro area. So if that's the case, you know, someone's going to do it, and we can't sit back and go, oh yeah, you know, we complain about this and complain about that. Because ultimately, someone needs to stand up and say, "Well, I need to take responsibility here and push the level forward." And I think that's what a lot of us are doing now. You know, and what's off the back of that, what spawned off the back of that, is obviously people have taken notice, and they've helped set up leagues and helped to facilitate that. So by no means is this just an effort just from people who've come over here and migrated here and then started to push the envelope a little bit. We're doing it from maybe the player development side, where a lot of us have a lot of influence. But off the back of that, there's other people who've said, "No, come on, let's really try to be in their slipstream and try to help to produce more players that are homegrown." And it's going to be a slow process, and we obviously need the help of the federation moving forward. And but you can already see the seeds are being sowed. And certainly on the boys' side, you're starting to see a lot of quality players that are coming through the system that are hopefully going to go on and play in the national team some stage down the road. I know Pat and Ina have got the same sort of vision for the girls' program as well. But it's going to take time. It's going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of work. And what I like about certainly my batch is most of us have stayed. Most of us are still here. For me, this is the eighth year that I've been here. So 8 years on, I'm still here and still wanting to work and still wanting to develop at kids at the youth level. Pat's been here for a shorter period of time, but she seems very passionate about doing it also. So yeah, I'd like to think that there is a wave of players from the women's game who will get involved at some point. I know that some already are. And there are other members of the national team that are doing it in other ways also, whether it be through media work. Look at Natasha, for example, someone who does it through being very prominent in media work, in commentary and things like that. Because there are so many really strong and positive female role models within the women's game here, and it's just about giving them a platform to try to inspire the next generation of homegrown Filipino girls, because if we can do that, and we talked about this so many times, haven't we, Jing? And I'd like to know your take on this, Pat. Is we believe that the women's game, if we can harness it, they've got a real shot at making a major tournament. And by major, I mean a World Cup. With the men's side, it's more difficult. It's a bit more of a pipe dream. But when you saw Thailand at the World Cup, right? And they're a target that's not a million miles away from where we're at right now. So, yeah, I mean, what do you think with that, Pat? Do you see that there's a real influx of people with a similar sort of mindset to you who are really sort of laser focused into trying to develop homegrown talent with a view to hopefully propelling us to that next level, which is obviously competing consistently on the Asian Cup level, and then maybe even propelling us to a World Cup potentially in the near future? Pat, she doesn't want to answer my question, Jing, I don't think.
It's not a good time to lose, Pat.
Across some people have the same mindset.
There she is. All right.
Sorry, Pat, go again. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I've definitely met some people that have a similar mindset, and it's been really nice. And I'd like to meet more people and network more in the football community here, and try to get together with these people and have a sense of community in terms of growing the game. So I'm fairly new in terms of coaching. So I'd like to network as much as I can, because I do think that the more sense of community you have within the coaching, coaches across Manila and further, is the best way that you can really develop your grassroots level, and hopefully leading up to being able to compete more at a highest level, because we're not far from it at all. We had a decent chance at it a few years ago. Mm-hmm. So, if we had the type, we had the time invested in the women's program, or it's definitely an attainable goal.
It's only been, a year and change maybe that you've been migrated over here? Has it been already?
I think it's been a year.
Yeah?
Reaching a year now.
And what's the outlook look like for you? I mean, is this something that you're going to do? Are we expecting you to be here on a more permanent basis, Pat?
Yes. I was speaking to a colleague not too long ago, and they were talking about some endeavors back home, and I was like, you know what? I really want to see things through here and see how I can help here, because they have an abundance of coaches and facilities and clubs. I mean, we don't have that, and to help here. Also, it's my roots. I want to try to give back as much as I can. So it's definitely looking awesome. Permanent.
Well, that's good news for the people who are developing here in the country, and for everybody at Kaya, that's for sure.
Very good news. Very good news, Jing.
You recently took over the Kaya account on Instagram, and you mentioned something that got me a little excited. You said that the ambition in the near future is for Kaya to join the women's league, and to not just join, but to dominate that league. I personally think, in a selfish point of view, that would be great for Kaya, but not just in that way. I like to think that in a broader sense, and think that if there was a team that could dominate and really showcase an entertaining style of football, that it could help propel that women's league to the next level. As an added bonus, if you guys are all together, mostly of which are part of the national team, then you guys are playing together on a regular basis, which can only do good things for your chemistry and your capability to work together on the national stage or international stage. tell us about your thoughts on being a part of Kaya, being a part of that squad, and getting an opportunity to play amongst your national team peers and some who are not part of the national team as well, and sort of the goal of being a part of that next league.
I think most of us have, especially the players from the national team as well, have spoken about how when we enter the women's league, we really want to be as competitive as possible. And yeah, like I said, I want to dominate the league because for me, I think that's the only way to kind of push the envelope and show other clubs like, yeah, this can be really interesting and this can be really competitive if you invest in your women's clubs teams, and maybe this will then eventually lead to it being a professional league. But yeah, you have to start somewhere, right? So yeah, that's my aspirations with the team, and I think all of us want that. A lot of our ex-UAP players, they're still quite fit, and they want to show the young ones what they can still do and the experience that they have over them. So I think it'll be an interesting competition for us.
It's extremely rare for Filipinos to go out and say like, "Oh, I want to play, not just play in that league, but I want to dominate that league." You know, to go out and say something like that, you don't see that too often. The only other people that I see are people like, maybe Anton Del Rosario will go out and say something like that. Chris might not be a stranger to saying, I'm going to go out there. But I'm not even too familiar with you going out and speaking like that, Chris. So I was
privately maybe.
Privately, yeah. So for it to be put out there like that, I personally enjoy it. I'm more involved in like the marketing side of things, and I like that. I like the stoking potential rivalries because that's what provides interest. People want to see whether you can prove it or if you're going to fall flat on your face. Either way, they're going to be watching, right?
Mm-hmm.
Women's rivalries.
Agreed,
it should be something that we look forward to.
She's very provocative, isn't she, Pat? I think she's. I think she's. I think she's just she likes to cause a little bit of chaos. So, yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how that women's league develops, and I think Kyle will be a great addition to that league, and I'd really interested to see how that would pan out with them involved, because there are some really good teams in that league, some really good women's teams. So it'd be nice to get some really competitive women's games, and like Pat said, to bring it to the next level. Sorry, Pat, to interrupt you.
No, I was just saying, I'm not at all cocky or anything, but if I'm gonna be a part of a competition, I want to put my best foot forward. So, and I have teammates that feel the same way. So, I think it was a good statement to say, especially with the Kaya that we do have, like, to be competitive, right?
Definitely. It's awesome to be able to get to know you a little bit better. We've had a few meetings casually, but now I get a chance to delve into your background and your aspirations here in the Philippines. I recently ran into a picture that was posted by a National Geographic photographer from the Philippines. Her name is Hannah Reyes. It was posted on like a Washington posting about life on quarantine, and I was shocked by the picture because it was like an urban setting, super urban setting, but the kids were playing football. I'd never seen this before. They were playing on the street, and this is something that Chris and I talk about, that we don't really see street football here in the country, and I was shocked that you were born in Makati and that you grew up on the streets of Poblacion, so to speak, and hopefully, with your involvement in the game and growing the sport and interest of the individuals, particularly girls, then maybe it'll be something that we see more often on our Instagram feeds, like young boys and girls playing football on the streets. That would be something that would really showcase how much times have changed in terms of the sport and how things are in the country. Because, man, when I was growing up, there was no chance. No chance you'd see anybody playing on the street here in the Philippines. So hopefully you'll be a part of that change. Thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. Anything else you'd like to ask or say, Chris?
No, I just want to say huge thanks to Pat. She's been a real breath of fresh air with our academy, and I know that, I said there are a lot of really good, positive role models, female role models in the game. But actually, there's only a handful probably in the coaching spectrum. I mentioned them before. Candice over at Football Fanatics, she does a great job. Bella has been involved with the YFL for a long time. You've got Amanda with the Sparta facility. So there's pockets of these really influential females who are doing an incredible job, and I think Pat is definitely of the same ilk, of the same caliber. She's a really, really innovative coach, and I know we sort of touched upon it at the beginning, but the stuff that she does with the Corva methodology is absolutely incredible. And I don't see many people running sessions of that standard, with that level of enthusiasm and with that level of detail. So if anyone looks that up and looks up that methodology, she is a really, really excellent exponent of that particular practice. So look it up, because it's a great methodology and it's a great way to develop your skills. And she's one of the best I've seen at delivering it. So I know our academy kids have really enjoyed working under her. She's been doing different age groups, different age ranges, but in particular, the influence that she's had on the girls has been hugely, hugely impactful. And so I hope that she can continue to do that with our girls. I hope that the other players who are involved with our academy and also in other academies and intend to come here to work with kids, I hope they continue to give back in the same way as the likes of Patricia and Nina, because we need those individuals. We need those people who can sprinkle their gold dust on these kids and really watch the next generation of kids blossom, because that's what it's all about. We're all here to try to positively impact the next up and coming coach Pat and the next coach Ina. So I hope that she continues to do so, because she's doing a wonderful job. So thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for all the great work that you've been doing, and hopefully this team we can on the training field soon. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been really fun, my first podcast, and I'd love to continue making an impact however I can.
Have you got any other messages? Yeah, have you got any other messages, Pat, for anyone who's listening? Any advice or any little pearls of wisdom that you think you'd like to share with our guests or with our listeners? Sorry. I
would just say continue to, and I know it sounds so cheesy, but really just continue to follow your dreams. There were so many times I was so close to quitting soccer or football because I just didn't feel like I was good enough or whatever the case may be, but I just kept on pushing through it and continue playing the beautiful game, because it's called the beautiful game for a reason. So whether you make it to the highest level or you become a coach, being able to spread the love in that sense, I think is really important, and spreading the sport is really great. So easy, but continue pursuing your aspirations.
Beautiful. Thank you, Patricia Tomanon. You can find her on Instagram and on Twitter. She's got some motivational messages that she could provide you there as well. Chris, I hope at some point in time I'm going to be the subject of such a glowing review from you as
Probably
well.
not.
That was good
Probably
stuff. We appreciate everybody who's been tuned in to the show. It's another Football Friday, and you guys have come along for the ride once again, and we appreciate that dearly on this program. We hope to provide you with more interesting shows while this quarantine period is ongoing, and hopefully we will see ourselves out of it in the near future as well. All right, all eyes will be on Bundesliga and La Liga and K-League and see how they're doing, and hopefully we'll be following along in their footsteps in the near future. If you like this show, if you like the content that we provide here on Across the Line, please do subscribe to the show on YouTube, Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts. Rate and review the show and find us on social media, as well as Patricia Tomanon on social media. All right, that's it, folks. Thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next time on the next Football